If you want to understand the exact moment my soul curdled, you have to understand the geography of Oak Creek, because this isn't just a neighborhood, it's a psychological experiment funded by people who think beige is a personality trait and that the length of your lawn is a moral compass. It's the kind of place where the silence is so heavy it feels like a physical weight pressing against your eardrums. A place where we don't have neighbors. We have co-residents, we have surveillance targets. We have enemies who smile and wave while mentally calculating if your hedges are 3 inches over the regulation height. I'm a simple man. I work in logistics. I spend 40 hours a week staring at spreadsheets that track shipping containers from Shenzhen to Long Beach. So my entire life is defined by order. Item A goes to location B. And if item it does not arrive, the world has failed. It's a binary existence that keeps me sane, or at least it did, until the Tuesday of the graphics card. I had been planning this build for 3 years. 3 years of using a computer that sounded like a jet engine trying to achieve takeoff every time I opened a second Chrome tab. And I had saved, I had scraped, I had eaten enough ramen noodles to preserve my internal organs, and finally, I pulled the trigger on an NVIDIA RTX 4090. This isn't just a purchase, it's a financial event. A $1,600 slab of technology so advanced it probably has its own consciousness. The kind of transaction where you call your bank beforehand so they don't freeze your assets. I was working from home that Tuesday specifically to intercept the package, sitting at my desk with the blinds drawn because the sun glares off my monitor, watching the Amazon tracking map on my second screen like a hawk. It's a sickness, isn't it? Watching that little blue dot crawl through the suburbs. Knowing your happiness is currently in the hands of a guy named Kevin who is 6 stops away. I went to the kitchen to make coffee, grinding the beans, vibrating with that specific nerd anxiety that comes when expensive electronics are in transit, and then the fatal error, the tactical blunder of historic proportions. I went to the bathroom. I was in there for maybe 4 minutes, 5 tops, washing my hands on my phone buzzed on the granite vanity, a single, cheerful vibration, delivered. Your package was left near the front door. The dopamine hit was immediate. I dried my hands on a decorative towel my wife Sarah insists is for display only, and I jogged to the front door. I didn't walk, I jogged, ready to hoist that heavy cardboard joint in my arms. But when I threw open the door, there was nothing but air, sunlight, and the smell of fresh mulch. The porch was empty. My brain rejected the visual data at first. Looking behind the potted fern, looking into the bushes, stepping out onto the concrete in my socks, while whispering, Kevin, to the universe, but the photo in the app didn't lie. There was my box with the Amazon smile, sitting exactly where my feet were currently standing. The timestamp said 2:14 p.m. It was currently 2:17 p.m., and in those 3 minutes, $1,600 had simply evaporated into the humid afternoon air of Oak Creek. I didn't panic because panic is for amateurs. I went straight to my office and pulled up the Ring interface, the black box recorder of my personal plane crash, and I watched the footage. There was Kevin, a good man, placing the box gently and snapping the photo. And then, at 2:15 p.m., the video buffered, a spinning white circle of doom, before resolving into the image of a woman entering from the left side of the frame. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a teenager in a hoodie. It was Brenda. Brenda, the president of the HOA Beautification Committee, a woman who once left a note on my windshield telling me my car was too dusty and it was affecting the neighborhood aesthetic. A woman shaped like a bell pepper who moves with the terrifying, inexorable confidence of a tank. She didn't sneak. She didn't look over her shoulder. She power walked out my driveway in her signature capri pants and a floral blouse that looked like a sofa from 1994, scooped up the RTX 4090 like it was a clutch purse, and marched it straight across the street into her own house. The silence in my house was absolute after the video ended. I could hear my own blood pounding in my ears because it wasn't just the theft, it was the casualness of it, the absolute lack of fear, the way she stole from me in broad daylight under camera. She knew was there because she felt entitled to it. I put on my shoes, still believing in the social contract, thinking maybe she was just protecting it from porch pirates in her own zealously intrusive way, and I crossed the street to the house, painted a color called soft lamb's ear, which is just gray for people who want to overcharge you. I rang the bell. A small dog began to scream like a sonic weapon inside. And Brenda opened the door, just 6 inches, looking at me with eyes that were flat and dead, like a shark that had lost interest in eating you, but might bite anyway, just to see how you taste. When I told her I saw the package was gone, she gave me this sigh, the sigh of a school teacher explaining subtraction to a particularly dense toddler, and told me crime was getting out of hand, that we needed a gate. When I told her I had her on 4K video, she didn't even flicker. She just looked me in the eye and said, "Jack, I don't know what you think you saw, but I haven't left my house all afternoon. I've been reorganizing my pantry because the humidity makes my flour clump." I was standing there, short-circuiting, experiencing gaslighting on an Olympic level, telling her I could see the floral print shirt she was wearing right now in the video, and she just sneered, told me I was being aggressive, and threatened to sue me for defamation. She told me to call the police, said she played bridge with the chief of police on Thursdays, and then she deadpanned, "Maybe the wind took it," before slamming the door so hard I felt the vibration in my teeth. I sat on my couch for 4 hours waiting for the police, watching the blue flicker of her TV across the street, knowing she was in there relaxing with my property while I stewed in my own juices. When Officer Miller finally arrived, a man who looked like he'd been 5 years away from retirement for the last 15 years, he watched the video, whistled, and then gave me the speech that broke my spirit. He couldn't kick the door down for a property dispute based on a Ring video. He said the Fourth Amendment required a warrant, and no judge was signing a warrant for a porch pirate case at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. He told me she just claimed she was protecting it from the wind, and a defense attorney would tear the video apart. Then he handed me a case number and advised me to get an Amazon locker because these people never stop. I stood on the sidewalk in the dark, watching a single light flick on in her upstairs bedroom, knowing she was going to sleep the sleep of the just, untroubled by conscience, while my graphics card probably served as a coaster for her dentures. The law had failed, civility had failed, and reason had failed, and as I walked back to my empty garage and stared at my workbench, I realized Brenda didn't want to play by the rules of society. She wanted to play by the rules of the jungle. Fine, if she wanted a package so badly, I was going to give her one, but it wasn't going to be electronics and it wasn't going to be a lawsuit. I was going to give her a biblical event, and I started by typing 2 words into a search bar: bull crickets. I woke up the next morning with what I can only call a justice hangover. That acidic, gnawing tightness in your chest that has nothing to do with what you drank and everything to do with the realization that the world is fundamentally broken. I lay there staring at the ceiling, imagining Brenda in her soft lamb's ear fortress, sipping her weak coffee and looking at my $1,600 box, wondering if she even knew what it was or if she was just using it as a very expensive doorstop. I decided to pull one last lever of civilian power. So I called the Oak Creek Homeowners Association, an organization that usually operates with the ruthlessness of the KGB, but the aesthetic of a Pottery Barn catalog. I've been fined $50 by these people because my garden hose was coiled counterclockwise, so surely I thought they'd have something to say about a board member committing grand larceny. The woman on the phone, Sharon, sounded like she smiled with too many teeth, but the moment I mentioned Brenda's name, the line went cold, a heavy, horror movie silence that told me everything I needed to know. Sharon whispered, literally whispered, that Brenda was the president of the board, the head of the compliance committee, and the person who would personally open any grievance email I sent. It was a closed loop of suburban corruption, a beige tyranny where Brenda investigated Brenda and found Brenda not guilty. And as I hung up, I realized that I wasn't just dealing with a thief, I was dealing with a warlord in capri pants. But I'm a logistics man. I need data before I go to war. I needed to know if the graphics card was a fluke or a pathology, so I opened the Amazon app and ordered bait, a 5-pound tub of Mass Monster vanilla protein powder. It was $30. It was heavy. It screamed value. And according to the reviews, it tasted like chalk mixed with sadness. The perfect prize for a greedy neighbor. I took a half day at work, set up my DSLR on a tripod in the guest bedroom, and waited with a bag of beef jerky and enough Red Bull to stop a horse's heart. At 1:48 p.m., the delivery guy dropped the box, snapped a photo, and left. And for 15 minutes, the street was silent until Brenda's garage door rumbled open. I watched through the telephoto lens, zoomed in so tight I could see the sweat on her upper lip as she pretended to weed a flower bed, glancing at my porch like a predator scenting the wind. She broke into that same trot, elbows pumping, total entitlement, snatched the box, and then did something that made my blood turn to ice. She looked directly into my Ring camera and smirked. It was a thin-lipped, "I know you're watching, you can't do anything," with its smirk, and in that moment, the last of my pacifism died a quiet death. I didn't call Officer Miller, I didn't cry. I just sat there in the dark listening to my camera shutter firing like a machine gun, documenting the death of my Mercy, and then I went back to that tab I'd left open. Wholesale feeder crickets. I didn't want a nuisance. I wanted a catastrophe, a localized plague of biblical proportions. But I'm a logistics manager, not an engineer, and I knew that if I just dumped bugs in a box, they'd be half dead or asleep by the time she opened it. I needed propulsion, I needed a cloud, I needed someone who understood the dark arts of fabrication. So I went to a DIY subreddit and found a guy named Scrap Heap Dave, a bearded giant who lived in a shop that smelled like ozone and grinding dust and looked like it had survived a nuclear war. Dave had a YouTube channel where he turned lawnmowers into flamethrowers, and when I told him a porch pirate stole my GPU, he just rumbled, "I hate thieves, bring cash and the crickets." We stood in his shop while a robot named Sir Kills-A-Lot repeatedly rammed a washing machine in the corner, and Dave sketched out the dual-flap catapult on a grease-stained workbench. He told me a motor would be too loud and batteries could fail, but kinetic energy? Kinetic energy is forever. We would reinforce the Amazon box with plywood so it wouldn't flex, load it with 2 spring-loaded scoops held back by garage door springs, and trigger it with a hair-thin fishing line taped to the top flaps. Once she pulls those flaps past 45 degrees, Dave said with a terrifying grin, "It's the point of no return. They'll be airborne at 15 feet per second, aimed right for the face and chest." I spent $400 on Dave Genius and another $200 at Cold-Blooded Critters, a shop where a guy named Tyler sold me 10,000 Akita domesticus and 2 tubs of biting superworms for texture. Carrying 2 writhing, chirping mesh sacks to my car was the most skin-crawling experience of my life. A constant, high-pitched static sound that made me have to turn the radio to full blast just to keep from screaming. Back in my garage, I fed them blue nutrient gel and watched them swarm. A brown, clicking mass of hunger, and I realized that the justice hangover was gone, replaced by the clarifying, cold focus of a man who was about to deliver a return address from hell. The assembly was a nightmare of latex gloves and sweat as I carefully glued the plywood, installed Dave's aluminum frame, and added lead weights to make the box feel like a $1,600 prize. The hardest part was the loading, trying to get 10,000 crickets into 2 plastic scoops without setting the trap off in my own face, feeling their tiny legs crawling up my arms and into my hair while I hissed "stay down" at a biological weapon. I taped the fishing line triggers to the flaps with the gentleness of a bomb squad technician, sealed it with branded Amazon tape, and slapped on a fake shipping label from Apple Incorporated specifically designed to trigger the primal greed of a suburban pirate. By Friday night, the box sat on my kitchen counter, thrumming with a low-frequency vibration of 10,000 legs rubbing together, a sound so ominous my wife, Sarah, packed a bag and left for her mother's, telling me I needed therapy. I didn't need therapy, I needed the sun to come up, I needed the light to be perfect for the 4K, slow-mo, and I needed Brenda to be hungry. I spent the night soundproofing the box with styrofoam and spraying it with old cologne to hide the smell of stressed insects, listening to that muffled hum, knowing that inside that cardboard square was a chaotic event just waiting for a catalyst. And as the sun began to peek over the beige rooftops of Oak Creek, I put on my high-vis vest and prepared to walk the walk. Saturday morning at 8:30 a.m. felt like the opening shot of a Western, the kind where the dust settles and the clock tower rings, and you know someone isn't walking away whole. I stepped onto my porch in that high-vis vest, heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird, and I had to set the box down on the welcome mat, which is ironic because what was inside was the opposite of a greeting. I knelt down, pretending to scan a barcode, and my finger hooked the metal ring of a safety pin Dave had installed. I took one last breath, pulled the pin with a soft click, and the weapon was live. I walked away without looking back, treating the driveway like a minefield, and retreated to my command center in the guest room to watch the monitors. I waited for 45 minutes, staring at the screen until my eyes burned, watching this soft lamb's ear door across the street. At 10:15, Brenda emerged in a purple velour tracksuit that caught the sun in a way that should have been illegal. She did a fake little stretch, glanced at my porch, and I saw her entire body stiffen. The predator had spotted the prey. She did her usual stealth routine, picking up invisible litter, checking her mailbox, and then she began the crossing. She was halfway up my driveway when the neighborhood paper boy, Timmy, rode by on his bike, and I watched her pivot from thief to gracious neighbor in half a second, waving and lying through her teeth about checking Jack's mail. The moment Timmy turned the corner, Brenda's face shifted back to pure, unadulterated greed. She marched up the steps, grunted as she hoisted the 5-pound box, the lead weights doing their job, and tucked it under her arm with a triumphant smirk. I switched to the DSLR as she entered her house and sat on her sofa. Through the sheer curtains, I could see her silhouette leaning over the coffee table, scissors in hand. She saw the Apple label. She actually let out a visible laugh of celebration, and then she sawed through the tape and pulled the flaps back, and for a split second, the world stood still. Boom! It wasn't a sound. It was a blurred eruption of brown static. 1 millisecond Brenda was a smug queen of the HOA, and the next, she was the epicenter of a biological explosion. The scoops fired with such G-force that the box actually jumped off the table, and 10,000 crickets hit the ceiling fan, which was on. The fan acted as a secondary dispersal unit, turning a column of insects into a 360-degree rainstorm of legs and wings, flinging biting superworms in her hair, her tracksuit, and her open mouth. I couldn't hear the scream through the glass, but I saw it, a primal, unhinged unmasking of her soul as she began the cricket dance, slapping her face, flailing her arms, and eventually scrambling on all fours toward the door. The soft lamb's ear door burst open and Brenda exploded on her lawn, screaming like a dying seal, ripping her tracksuit jacket off and throwing it into the bushes while crickets cascaded out of her sleeves. I walked out onto my porch, leaned against the railing with my coffee, and called out, "Morning, Brenda. Everything okay?" She looked at me, hair a bird's nest of insects, a cricket literally perched on her nose, and she shrieked that I had attacked her with a bug bomb. I just smiled, took a sip of my coffee, and said, "I have no idea what you're talking about, Brenda. That was a delivery from my new lizard farm. Did you accidentally intercept my livestock? Because I'm sure Officer Miller would love to hear how you mistakenly opened a package addressed to me in the middle of your living room." She froze, the realization hitting her like a freight train that she had been caught, filmed, and utterly humiliated in a trap of her own making. She fled to her car, sobbing as she swatted strays off her windshield, and spent the next week at a Holiday Inn while an exterminator tented her house, a bill that cost her more than 3 RTX 4090s. When she finally came back, the warlord was gone. She walks with her head down now, and whenever a package sits on my porch, she recoils as if it might bite her. I finally got my replacement card, and as I installed it, I realized that the law didn't fix Oak Creek, but 10,000 crickets certainly did. So, I have to ask you guys, was I the Karen here for escalating a property dispute into a plague, or did Brenda get exactly what she deserved for thinking the neighborhood was her personal shopping mall? And I know some of you have HOA horror stories that would make my skin crawl. Tell me about them in the comments, and let me know if you think I went too far, or if I didn't go far enough. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more logistical solutions to life's problems.